Backlash was this past weekend, and on the YouTube channel, I did put out like a kind of review of Backlash, and I know Brandon, you saw it live. I saw it post happening live, which was awesome in the sense of the time length of this pay-per-view PLE event. And Brandon, I'll ask you this question: do you think? Because I think that from start to finish, this pay-per-view will be the most rewatched pay-per-view if you're in its entirety of the last like 5 years, based on the fact that it's of a short amount of time that has rewatchability. Because listen, WrestleMania, it's going to be rewatched when it comes to certain clips or certain matches. But as somebody who loves the Royal Rumble and loves WrestleMania, when's the last time you went back and rewatched WrestleMania 38 from start to finish in its 9-hour form?
Yeah, I haven't, and I probably won't. Yeah, I mean, watchability wise, I mean, yeah, this definitely fits the bill. I mean, today's movies now, like movies that come out nowadays, a lot of them, there's a lot out there that are longer than what we saw this past weekend at Backlash, lengthwise. Like it's insane. I think it was like just between what 2.5, 2:45. I think is because we were texting about it. Mm-hmm. You know, it was a good length. It was between 2.5 and 3 hours. That is a perfect length for a pay-per-view. I love this formula. I know we're going to get to the card and break that down a little bit. It was 5 matches, and I thought the match lengths were pretty good. I don't, you know, there wasn't there I mean, besides the Cena Randy Orton match. I mean, most of the matches were under 20 minutes. If I got that right. So that's. I mean, it served a purpose. I thought it was a good show. It was nice and tight. I have zero complaints of the actual pay-per-view. I enjoyed watching it live.
And I'll say, like, it has that rewatchability, whether it's good or bad. Let's just be real. WrestleMania 9 is not as good as WrestleMania 40, right? But the odds are I'm going to rewatch WrestleMania 9 20, 30 years down the road, even, you know, when it's WrestleMania season, put it on in the background and watch it from start to finish because it just has the ability to do that. You know, there's Stairway to Heaven, right? It's a great song, probably better than a Nicki Minaj song, but Nicki Minaj song's 90 seconds to 2 minutes long versus 12 and a half minutes or so for Stairway to Heaven, depending on what version you get. So just the accessibility to rewatch an event. And that's the best part. That's probably why 90s wrestling as well is just so much more fond when it comes to fans. We all have that romance of the past. Yeah, because we can remember WrestleManias and Royal Rumbles from start to finish. We can look back on wrestling in the early 2000s and through the Attitude Era and can actually remember entire shows. Nowadays we don't have that ability because there's just so much content. And great, it makes it so that we have the ability to watch a few minutes here and you can watch a few minutes there and we can all pick out what we like to watch. But the problem is we don't have that communal thing. We don't have that thing where literally we can remember Monday Night Raws in their entireties, WrestleManias in their entireties, because it just doesn't afford us the opportunity to do so. I can remember, like, when I watched wrestling from, you know, 1999 to 2001, like I knew every minute of every SmackDown and Raw because they were short enough to do that. They were the only game in town a lot of that time with WCW on its way out. And the pay-per-views were 2.5 hours long, even WrestleManias at that time. So you just remember full cards and remember watching full cards. And personally, as somebody who didn't watch this one live, I appreciate, you know, that it was in that length. So I didn't have to do fast forwarding or skip through matches. And we wondered, because we're just so accustomed to pay-per-views being long, always at least being 3 hours, if not longer, like how are they going to drag this one out? Because a lot of these matches don't have the you know, the length to them on paper, right? Gunther and Pat McAfee didn't look like it was going to be a 40-minute match on paper, right? And WWE said it's not, and we're not going to drag it out. We're just going to give you those matches, and we're going to, you know,
but it went almost 15 minutes though, which is
crazy. It was one of the longer matches on the card. I think a lot of that was a lot of posturing, right? Which I think kind of dragged out a little bit, right? We had
here's the other thing too. Gunther is very he's very deliberate when he does his movements. Like everything he does has a purpose, and that's why I really love what he does. He makes everything have some sort of purpose, reasoning behind it, and his pace is always good. It's a slower pace, and you know it worked out well because Pat still got some shots in where there was chances where he could actually win the match. It was, you know, I thought if anybody can make somebody like a Pat McAfee or, maybe the Goldberg talk, which we'll save for another day, those possibilities of a decent match. Gunther's the kind of guy you want to have face those legends of the past or celebrities, so to speak, because Gunther to me can make it work. He can call a good match and he can make it look believable and make it look like make it look like they're not like the opponent's not out of water, so to speak. It's not like a fish out of water. Like it looked somewhat natural and Pat looked good. I think Gunther did a good job of making Pat look good. And I think Pat did a good job of in a way making Gunther look good as well, making him look so tough and so, almost unbeatable like a Terminator. So like I really enjoyed that, almost 15 minutes of a match between those two guys.
I'll say overall, we obviously talked a lot of positives of this pay-per-view, and John Cena and Randy Orton, the main event, put on a show. But kind of thinking about, to the past in general, this pay-per-view, if it was around during the pay-per-view era, did it feel like a $34.99 pay-per-view? To me, I feel like there's a lot more hype going into this upcoming Saturday night's main event feeling like a big event. Not saying anything away from John Cena, Randy Orton, but overall, I think, outside of the main event, it didn't feel big, right? We're in an arena for the first time this year for a pay-per-view because all the other ones were in stadiums. But even just looking at like Elimination Chamber, and obviously it had the big moment at the end with The Rock and Cody Rhodes and the heel turn. But I felt like Elimination Chamber felt big, felt like as big as like a WrestleMania would 20 years ago. Now Elimination Chamber's feeling that big. And then we move on to Backlash, and I just felt like it just didn't feel big. What do you think about like that opinion?
I have to disagree. I disagree because the 5 matches that they put on for this premium live event were all quality matches, one way, shape, or form, and it kept in that pocket of under 3 hours. And I think every single match served a purpose. Every single match I watched from start to finish, and I was entertained all the way through because I've watched pay-per-views in the past where like there's certain matches where I'm like, when is this match going to be over? Because it just was boring, and I didn't feel that at all for Backlash. Like I felt like I thought it was a really good pay-per-view. I wouldn't say it was the greatest pay-per-view of all time. I'm not saying that, but I thought it was a very quality show. And for me, if I had to pick a match that I felt was the match of the night, and I kind of alluded to it last week.
You agree, Becky Lynch and Lyra Valkyria. Yeah, they put on one of the second longest match of the night behind the main event. You were correct in that.
Yeah, it was. And here's the thing, it delivered. It delivered in every aspect. Like I see these different wrestling beat writers and these the dirt sheets of the world talking about like some of the women's matches. I have to like they were talking about them in a way like they're not good. I have to disagree with that because I think the women's wrestling is, I think in a lot of cases has been better than the men's. And I think this is a case of that where Becky Lynch and Lyra Valkyria, I felt like they stole the show. Like I thought they both put on a hell of a performance. And you know what? It doesn't matter who won the match because we as the fans were the winners, and both of them looked good going out of that match no matter what. It was just a good match.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Dominic Mysterio put on a good display in his match as well.
He's improved.
Yes. It's weird because, obviously they always put him in there with the luchadors because of his name, but he's not luchador sized. So it's really strange because, like, it'd be like Mick Foley's son looking like Chad Gable or looking like, I guess Mick Foley, if his son looked like Drew McIntyre, but you want to put him in like all these hardcore boiler room brawls. But like, that's how we have Mysterio right here because Rey Mysterio's son is Dominic Mysterio, and he's got Mysterio in his name, and he's of Mexican descent. So of course you're going to want to put him in there with the luchadors, but you forget he's like 6 foot tall. You know what I mean? And he's not necessarily matches that in his own right, but he finds a way to like mix his style, but still do things like the 5-star frog splash. I would say very Eddie Guerrero-ish. I see how he moves.
Yeah, no, and here's the thing too. You mentioned Eddie Guerrero. He's got the hair that mullet that the late great Eddie Guerrero had. It's just when I watch him do the frog splash, just the way the hair moves, and I know it's just it's a one little part of it, the way the hair moves, it even looks like Eddie Guerrero in a way. Like I'm not saying Dom is at that level because he's not, but he's come a long way, in the last few years. Like he knows how to he knows how to create buzz and nuclear heat, and he's putting on better matches. Like he's, to me, in the last 5 years, I would say in the last 5 years or so, he's probably the most improved wrestler in the business. Like from where he was, that I remember his first match that I watched live. I'm like, this kid doesn't deserve to be in WWE. Like he's not good enough yet. He needs work. And you fast forward to where we are tonight, today, a champ, intercontinental champ, and he's gotten so much better in the ring, and he's very over with the fans, and I'm very happy to see it.
Yeah, and it might be a little too late, but you talk about the look, and obviously you can roll back to 2005 times, but it might be a little too late in the sense of, not striking while the iron is hot. But boy, with the look that he has, the moveset that he has, and obviously the history that he has going back to 2005 with a certain storyline, it'd been pretty sweet if he was rebranded as Dominic Guerrero. That might be
he is branding himself as not Latino Heat but Latino Cheat. So that'd go a long way if he rebranded himself as a Guerrero.
And all intents and purposes, right? Isn't he the biological son of Eddie Guerrero, not Rey Mysterio? And to kind of do a callback to that in the sense of like, because he matches it so well. So, it might be a little too late because I think that would have been a good thing to do right when the heel turn began, right when he broke away from his father. So it might be a little too late now because he's not really with his dad anymore, right? He was with his dad and then he was feuding with his dad, but now it's like, right, they're on separate shows. They're completely removed from each other. I think that's great. He's really finding his own. As John Cena, as you said, right, used some dirty tactics to win his match. And for once they use the post show in essentially a positive way, because we all know John Cena didn't show up on Monday Night Raw. He's probably not going to show up on SmackDown, but they use him in a positive way to forward a storyline, him and potentially R-Truth at Saturday Night's Main Event for the championship. But overall, what did you make of the championship main event match? Did you like the ending? Did you want something a little more definitive? What overall, I know you knew John Cena was going to retain. Do you think we should get John Cena and Randy Orton one more time? Or do you think that's a good fitting way to end their rivalry?
I think it's a good way to pivot to a new rivalry for John Cena. I think a CM Punk John Cena rivalry is coming down the pipe very soon, I think. So yeah, I honestly, it was, the pacing was good. I mean, they're two legends. They know what they're doing in the ring. I thought they did a great job. I thought the match was good for somebody like John Cena, who, doesn't wrestle very often anymore. He's almost 50. Randy's getting closer to retirement. He's not going to be wrestling, forever either. His day is coming down the line. Hopefully not soon, because he still looks great in the ring. But for what it was, for 240 somethings, they put on a good show. I thought the fans were engaged. I enjoyed the match. I enjoyed the finish. And you know what? I'm happy with the way it finished, where they can move on to other things as I kind of presented. I think it's a good way for them to move on. I'm excited for the next thing, which is, to me, I know R-Truth, that stuff with the table at the press conference and that whole thing, but I'm really looking ahead and looking forward to, revitalizing, I think, 2011-ish, CM Punk and John Cena.
Yeah. I'll close it out with this, right? I saw a lot of people posting this after the event because Backlash, it is in its 20th year, and at the early start of its being a pay-per-view like 2000, 2001, its set design was one of the more iconic ones with the swinging hooks. Anybody who grew up in the Attitude Era remembers that very fondly, very vividly. So of all the pay-per-views, while it's a B show, post-WrestleMania pay-per-view, essentially, its set always had a very iconic place in a lot of fans' minds. And a lot of people were posting that, this pay-per-view, the set was a scaled down version of what we get from Monday Night Raw, which essentially is a scaled down version already of a set, and I do understand that the arguments a lot of times for that is that we get more people in the stands and stuff like that. So to kind of play it a different way, instead of saying that I want a big elaborate hook set, or instead of saying, that we want a set where we can get more people in, I think there is somewhat of a middle ground. Backlash, for example, when it was in Puerto Rico, right? It just had the tunnel where we obviously have that iconic Bad Bunny entrance in Puerto Rico, and some of the other smaller set designs where they do amplify the showing of the crowd more than the set. There are ways to do it where you don't have to put a lot of money into it. And I kind of think of like WrestleMania 15, which is crazy enough to think. But if you look back at some of the 90s pay-per-views where they were selling out full arenas because it was in the middle of the Attitude Era, and they sometimes didn't even have screens. I think WrestleMania 15, right, just had the XV logo, and they just came out and it was like made of pipe and it just said WrestleMania XV, nothing fancy. But I think what fans are trying to say when they're saying they don't like the set that they got and it just looked house showish, it just looked very bland, I do understand. The idea isn't that we don't necessarily need big elaborate sets. We don't necessarily need the swinging hooks to return. We just need to have some creativity. It's like the world of minor league baseball and major league baseball. It's like saying, I get it. You want to fit more seats in. You want to have a larger crowd. It's not about that. It's about creativity. A good example, right? Citi Field and Yankee Stadium, both in New York City, Citi Field and Yankee Stadium both fit 50,000 people, but a lot of people love Citi Field more because they feel that they've actually were able to fit more people in while being creative at the same time. So I'm a fan of like Money in the Bank is going to be at the Intuit Dome in Los Angeles. It's going to be a huge crowd. They're going to sell out the whole arena, but similar to what we've seen with Saturday night's main event, right? They're selling out the whole arena, but something about the way that they're able to do it in a creative sense, to have that nostalgia, have that entranceway that is unique and different, and it makes the show feel different. And that's another reason why I think Saturday night's main event is getting a lot of this push, because they find a way to make Saturday night's main event have that uniqueness to it. So with that, I will say in the future, Triple H, WWE, it's not about size. It's not about scale. It's about just thought. And I hope we see some more of that going forward.